Well, this weekend, the Pentagon, among others, remain on high alert for a possible North Korean nuclear test. There are signs it could be imminent. And the news comes as joint U.S.-South Korean war games continue on the Korean Peninsula. And experts warn we may be closer than ever to a point where a war of words turns into a real war. Let's bring in Dean Cheng, senior fellow with the Heritage Foundation's Davis Institute. So we've seen this before. We've seen nuclear tests before. We've seen missile tests before. We've seen all the rhetoric from Pyongyang. The question is, at what point are they going to do something that the United States and South Korea is forced to respond to with something other than words?
This is a country that basically sank a South Korean frigate without warning, shelled South Korean territory, at one point blew up the entire South Korean cabinet. I think it's very difficult to predict at what point they will do something that goes totally beyond the bounds of acceptable behavior.
What is their game here? If the game is simply regime survival, why keep poking the proverbial bear that is the United States military?
Well, in the first place, past pokes haven't led to any reaction.
Do they want a reaction at some point? Do they need it? Does he need that kind of, does he need that to improve his standing with his own people?
That certainly doesn't hurt, but I think part of it also is keeping the Americans at arm's length. I mean, this is your classic madman theory. If I'm willing to do this just on a random Tuesday morning, imagine how I might react if you actually came back at me. So stay far away from me or else. Well,
and we all know that anytime Kim Jong-un is anywhere, there's not a lot of people far for him. We have this picture that we found, and this struck us as, shall we say, unusual. Was this a choreographed, a impromptu piggyback ride, or is there something else going on here from a guy who has purged so many people, even relatives around him?
This is a man who has ordered the execution of close partners and even family members with anti-aircraft cannons.
So you don't just jump on him for a piggyback ride?
It'd be really risky.
So what's the message this picture's trying to send? If everything's choreographed, why put something like that out?
I think the message there is, look, we had this great accomplishment, and even senior military and political leaders around Kim Jong-un are just delighted. Look at what we've achieved.
Look at how happy we are. I'm so happy I'll give you a piggyback ride.
Yep.
That's one way to show, I guess, appreciation to your military. So where does this go from here? We have the U.S.-South Korean war games sort of continuing for the next couple of months. We've had this rhetoric from the U.S. Secretary of State, who at least sort of made an overture that there could be U.S. military action. Do we get to that point, or does everybody walk away and decide to fight another day?
Well, actually, the administration has already demonstrated greater resolve. It has cut off North Korea's banks from the global financial system. This is hitting North Korea, and particularly the Kim family, where it hurts. And that was just about the same time that Secretary of State Tillerson said, everything's on the table. So we're actually seeing more sanctions and more moves being put in place.
Does that increase the chance that they, for lack of a better term, go nuclear? Or does that mean that the Kim family goes, maybe we're not going to take this guy on?
When you hurt the guy in his pocketbook, I think that you are really forcing them to consider, if things keep going down this path, you're really not going to be left with anything at all.
And we keep hearing from, at least from the administration and our sources there, that they're willing to continue to twist the thumb screws. Dean, excellent analysis. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Great having you.
About that.
Wait, do it.
Numbered overtime. Oh, gee, baby, I haven't done this in a while.
It's been too long.
Yesterday, and then we had like breaking news
Too long.
for a couple days there, and I am so glad.
And when
we're
we do
back
it without
online.
you, it doesn't get us into the right enthusiasm into OT.
So sweet.
Yes.
I'm excited.
It doesn't.
I can't remember the last time. First of all, it's been a minute since you were here, and I don't think you guys have been on together.
We haven't. No. Yeah.
I mean, this was paprika. It was a special. It was what? Spice. Baby.
I knew it would be.
Yeah, it was a special point. So
I only know Marie from TV. That's
you know
it.
what I did?
I thought it was very respectfully done, by the way.
Well,
I collected questions on Twitter.
Okay.
Because people say, oh, we love the live chat, but I'm traveling today. Can you do Twitter? All right, so
Twitter love.
George Pizanowski says, one of two, I'm only going to read the first one. All this talk about health care, why can't we just have some health care the same as Congress? Anybody?
Well, I wanted to continue our feisty conversation.
Well,
Yeah, thanks to that man.
What health care does Congress get again?
It's like a golden Cadillac model, I believe.
I love the bill.
Nice.
Marie was very silent, which tells me it's pretty good, right?
It's really nice.
Yes.
Which is why Congress would never vote for a bill that I really like, which would put every member of Congress on the same health care that vets get. We'll see how long
I agree with
that.
Oh, so
That's what we should do.
Yeah, thank you for your question, George. One more real quick one, and then we'll go back to spicy. This might get us there, though. This is Pamela Sharon. She says, why do I never get a response? Now you are. Another penalty? Remove the 30% penalty paid to insurance companies. Put a waiting period instead.
They're talking about this sort of backdoor mandate is what she's talking about.
And instead of paying the government via the IRS,
I don't know why they're doing that.
You're gonna pay this penalty, this 30%, to get onto insurance if yours lapses or you for whatever reason.
Part of me thinks that'll be gone by the time the talk is.
Kurt Harlocker wrote this, Pete. Pete is the voice of common sense. Totally on board with him about the health care plan. Make it as conservative as possible now. Get it right the first time.
Yeah, but the problem. So I agree with that as an opening position, but we all know that when the sausage gets made, it's going to be a bill that almost nobody likes.
Listen, right? I was surprised with Paul when it first came out. I was surprised that it was sort of not, expansion of Medicaid, keeping the Cadillac tax, things like that. I was very surprised it was kept in. I just want the Freedom Caucus and the moderates and everyone in between to work collectively together and to talk to Paul Ryan, to speak with I keep calling him Donald Trump. People get mad. President Trump. It's I've been watching him on TV my entire life. It's an old habits break. But I just want us all to collectively to come together and work together because it gives too much ammo to the left when we don't.
Pete, can I ask you a question on this? If I know no Republicans
Can we talk about foreign policy
and then
again?
we'll go to foreign policy. Then we'll go to foreign policy. I know Republicans don't believe, or some Republicans don't believe the numbers. But if some of these numbers are right and a bunch of people lose their insurance, or if the cost goes up significantly, particularly for the elderly, are you okay with that?
It's not that I don't think that's what will happen. That's why.
But if it does, play just.
No, I mean, listen. What I think the left wants to do is get to single-payer health care. That we know that's where they want to go. A lot of people feel betrayed by Obamacare in the first place. They wanted to go further. And if that's your goal, then you think everybody's covered and everybody gets great care. Having seen the VA and what that actually means when you get single-payer, it's not good. So just because you have additional million number of people on a care or a bad plan doesn't mean they're getting good care.
Right.
I think you have to re-incentivize the market. So I don't want anyone to lose their health care, but I want to let people choose to not have it if they want to.
If costs go up, is that an acceptable outcome?
They can't go up any faster than they went on.
That's not true.
I don't want
How
them to
about if costs go up at first, but longer term they come down?
Which is what they say is going to happen.
Saying would happen
because of the really steep cuts to Medicaid, which a lot of people rely on.
Okay.
All right, let's talk foreign policy. Let's go back to the mattresses, people. All right, so during the TV version of us, and I'm just reading the live chat because people are like, talk to me about ISIS. You guys were kind of going at it a little bit. One thing we didn't bring up, so I can't wait for this discussion, North Korea, haven't talked about that at all.
Oh, boy.
Marie, really, the past administration sort of looked at that with a side eye. And it has festered. Under Barack Obama's watch, it festered. So this is where we are now. And when I hear criticism that President Trump is putting too much emphasis on China and North Korea, I scratch my head. These guys are crazy. I mean, they are. No.
They are crazy.
They are.
Oh,
They're willing to kill their neighbors with a nuclear weapon.
So what I would say is, he's fed his brother to be eaten alive by wild dogs.
Yes.
I mean what I would say is every president comes in for the last several facing the North Korea challenge, and every president very quickly realizes that there aren't a lot of good options. And what we in the Obama administration did was put, along with the UN, the toughest international sanctions on North Korea that have ever been in place. That clearly hasn't changed their behavior. So then you get to a point, and you heard Rex Tillerson doing a little bit of this during his recent trip to Asia, that all options are on the table. Military options, and Pete would know this better than anyone, there's not good military options either. So you're facing a situation where we deployed extra resources to South Korea and Japan. We're working with the Chinese to try and get them to pressure the North Koreans more. But there's not like a perfect option that we just weren't willing to take and that the Trump administration can't.
No, there isn't a perfect option. But what the bad thing that was done that I think the Obama administration did time and time again, which is so foolish, which is to take the military option off the table to begin with, which means you're never negotiating from a true position of strength. And you also, the administration was obsessed with things like global zero on nuclear weapons, which is this ridiculous argument.
Treatment.
No, it doesn't. When did we take military options off the table with North Korea? I don't remember
doing that. You took it off the table with Iran, which led to a very bad, silly deal.
Specifically, he was not taking military options off the table.
There's not a soul on the planet that ever believed he would use it. Not a soul. The threat has to be credible for it to be effective. I don't buy that for a second.
I sat in those meetings negotiating that nuclear deal. The Iranians believed her. They wouldn't have been there.
I don't buy that for a hot second,
all right,
if I was in the meeting or not. The perception is reality that he was never going to act militarily, and therefore they could get a better deal.
I want to take it back. Cynthia Ann 555 says, no, we got to take it back to ISIS. She thinks you made a great point. If you have sworn allegiance to ISIS, your citizenship is not with the country you reside in or were born in, such as the case of London terrorists. # revoked.
But Harris, you made a good point. In a democratic society, you can't just strip someone's citizenship without due process. I mean, it is very hard to take someone's citizenship away. And so you can't just
So maybe we should rethink that.
Wait,
why
can
do we
I
have
ask
to
you a
be
quick
wedded
question?
to the existing model?
I assume
that's a pretty bold statement.
Fine. We should live in bold times.
No, I know.
We face a generational and existential type threat that is based on an ideology that's well grounded, that is on the offensive and extremely violent. We haven't dealt the Nazism was a conjured up thing that was built by Hitler. Islamism is based on a theology that is far more coherent, well funded, and spreading.
I think that either would be more or less dangerous.
But I mean, the loud and silent invasion of Islamism is the cause of our time, and whether or not we actually fight it.
Where do you really?
Can I ask a question?
Sorry.
So I assume from the way you were talking on the show that on some level you like the Freedom Caucus and ideologically you're a little bit aligned with them. Is that fair enough?
On some things, but not on a lot of the national
Okay, because I was going to say when it comes to civil liberties and national security, I mean, to say that they're the polar opposite of me is putting it very lightly. And they would say you're infringing on their civil liberties. I'm like you. I'm like, you want to kill me? You want to stop my way of life? Screw you. Take your citizenship away. You can go to Gitmo. You can go to someplace else. I don't really care. And do you want to know why my way of life is better than yours? Because I can go outside in a tank top without getting stoned. That's why America is better than that way of life. Ooh. Hands down. No, and I don't. I have zero patience for it. I am unmovable on this. As I tell you, it's my Achilles heel. Fastest way to get me riled up. I went to a dinner party one time where I had to leave on this very issue. Not even kidding. But for me, like with people like the Freedom Caucus, with things like that, that is part of the reason why I have such problems with them right now, is because I find in instances, especially like national security, that you're looking at the macro or the micro, and not looking at macros have the micro.
Right.
And I just don't understand going forward. That is why, just going back to the politics of them at the same time, why I find them so dismissive of the rest of the party in so many ways. I think people like us, especially when it comes to national security, are living in reality a lot more than they are.
Well, but also citizenship isn't a shield. So, for example, and going back to the Obama administration, ordering a strike on a U.S. citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki, killing a U.S. citizen in a drone strike, his citizenship couldn't shield him from that kinetic action that we decided to take. And you can criticize other things, but getting him off the battlefield was actually a good thing for American security. So I'm not saying that there's no limits to this, but when you start talking about taking, that's just, you're going down a slippery slope.
There's going to be a process. I'm not saying you get to say your citizenship is gone.
Before we go, you got a minute left. There's a lot of questions, Marie. A lot of people want to know more about where you came from before you worked at the State Department, what your past was.
So those are deep questions.
People love to listen, love to learn something.
So I started in Washington as a career CIA officer, nonpartisan in the Bush administration. I was an analyst. I focused on Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. That's what I'd studied. And I did that for 6 years. I was our spokesperson towards the end of that for Bush and Obama administrations. Then I went to the campaign.
A lot of people may not know that.
I was a spokesperson for Mike Hayden, and he's one of my favorite bosses. So on national security, I am actually not. One of the things I was getting at on the show.
Well, they were just asking kindly. It wasn't a challenge.
No, I know. But on the show, I got a lot of criticism from liberals in my party, working for the CIA, working when we were taking a lot of action against terrorists.
For working for the CIA?
Yes.
That's the left.
They can.
Come on.
They can. But, I mean, I can't say that on this. That is.
Anyway,
I want to know what she was going to say.
I became like a spokesperson later in life.
Cool.
I'm more of a national security nerd.
Very cool. It's great to have you on. Pete?
It's great to be here always. Thank you, guys.
We'll see you back here tomorrow for more Outnumbered.
Thank you.
OT, baby.
Bye.
Well, with so much focus placed on the alleged Russian infiltration of our presidential election, another possible threat to our democracy may have slipped through the cracks, and that is China. A new Department of Defense study has raised some alarm bells about what Beijing may be up to. That report discovered the Chinese government is directing investment companies with close ties to invest heavily in American technology startups, mainly firms dealing with sensitive military technology. Well, some fear China may be more after the profits, but some American secrets as well. Our next guest is an old China hand, is the author of this new book that chronicles his father's service in World War II, from the home front to the battlefront, an Ohio teenager in World War II. I'm pleased to have Frank Lavin with us. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Singapore, Undersecretary of Commerce in the George W. Bush administration. Ambassador, good to see you.
Thanks, Eric. Good to be here.
Now, you're head of a company called Export Now.
Right.
You work in China, so you know how they think.
Sure.
What are they up to?
Look, I'm not surprised at all that we're seeing this story, meaning much of U.S. technology innovation has some kind of security or defense application, and we should fully expect that foreign countries would seek to acquire that legally or illegally. So the fact that we're seeing indications of Chinese companies, some of them that are government linked, investing in these startups and so forth, shouldn't be a surprise. I think really the burden's on us in the United States, our tech companies, our investment groups, the FBI, to make sure we've got the proper enforcement mechanisms, the proper protections in place.
Do we have that now, and do you think they can pluck out our secrets?
I think we historically have done a pretty good job with it, but I don't think it's fully up to speed to where we need to be in this tech age. Meaning historically, we have this CFIUS mechanism. CFIUS is a Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States that reviews, approves the security implications of acquisitions. So if a German steel mill wanted to acquire a U.S. steel mill, it had to go through a formal review process to see if there were security implications. That worked very well. This is different. This is just investments in tech companies where people are trying to acquire specialized technology that might have defense application. I don't think we have a full system in place to guard against that.
That's CFIUS. Some, are concerned about the Russian uranium ore deal, that the Russians grabbed. So are you confident that we can address this at some point?
Yeah, I think so.
To protect us.
I think so. What we've got to do is broaden the scope of CFIUS so it allows for investment, not just acquisition. We've also got to make sure the FBI is working closely with the tech community people need to be on guard, that if you're getting inquiries and investments from overseas, you need to have a reporting mechanism. You need to get help from people in the intelligence service in the United States to make sure you're not making any mistakes.
And meanwhile, we got one eye over there looking for what they're doing. What about North Korea?
Yeah.
I mean, they have protected North Korea at the Security Council all these years. They're responsible for 90% of the trade. Why won't they? What would happen if they turned off the spigot, the oil, and just turned off the lights?
Well, but there's two or three scenarios there, one of which is positive, that North Korea sort of moves toward a more rule-abiding regime. That's the positive scenario. The less positive scenario is that there's economic collapse and then China gets the refugees, so they don't want that. Or the worst case scenario is some kind of conflict breaks out. Nobody wants that. So there's risk involved in a complete shutdown. I don't think we would seek that from China. What we in the United States do want from China is more of an edge to what they're doing in North Korea, a harder push, tougher sanctions, tougher economic might to help North Korea move the right way.
The Secretary of State Tillerson was just there. Do you think that the Chinese will finally get that message and they'll take stronger action?
Well, interestingly, I do think they're getting the message, not so much necessarily because we're directly requesting it, but because they see South Korea putting the THAAD, the anti-missile system, in place. They're concerned about South Korea moving more toward us. They're concerned about what we might do. So they know unless they play some kind of constructive role in this process, there's a chance that South Korea or even Japan escalate themselves.
And finally, we've got all these threats we talked about. Your book is about your dad. He, a teenager from Ohio, was in the Battle of the Bulge. My dad shot down in B-24. What lessons are there from our fathers to the new generation when you consider the threats that we face as Americans today?
Well, that was an era of enormous national sacrifice. Your dad, my dad, several million Americans under arms. I think what I take away from that book is, look, we concerned in history about what Churchill did and what Truman did, what Eisenhower did. Let's not forget that it's 1 million or 2 million teenagers or 20-year-olds that are actually fighting that war, and the country called on them to make that sacrifice. They rose to the occasion. The Battle of the Bulge is the greatest battle, the largest battle the U.S. Army has ever fought. 600,000 direct combatants, 400,000 support combatants. I mean, a massive 1 million people in one battle, 20,000 American casualties, 20,000 killed beyond the casualties, and 40,000 prisoners. So extraordinary price to pay to hold that line and make sure Hitler didn't smash through the Ardennes. It's a tough story, but it shows you, I think, when the chips are down, your dad, my dad, rose to the moment.
We can take inspiration and have aspirations from what they have done in the service in the past. Frank, congratulations on the book.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you for joining us, and we'll get you back to talk about China, because that issue and North Korea are not going away.
Not going away.
Of course. Thank you.
Yesterday, an act of terrorism tried to silence our democracy. But today we meet as normal. as generations have done before us and as future generations will continue to do, to deliver a simple message. We are not afraid, and our resolve will never waver in the face of terrorism.
British Prime Minister Theresa May addressing Parliament Thursday, one day after a terror attack in central London that left 4 victims dead, including 1 American and dozens of others injured. The attacker, identified as 52-year-old British-born citizen Khalid Massoud, drove a car into pedestrians on Westminster Bridge and then attempted to enter Parliament, stabbing a police officer before being shot and killed. Wednesday's attack came on the 1-year anniversary of the Islamic State assault on the airport and subway station in Brussels, and also follows last year's truck rampages in Nice and Berlin. Wall Street Journal columnist and editorial page writer Sohrab Ahmari joins us now from London. Welcome, Sohrab.
Hi, Paul.
Okay, so Islamic State has claimed credit for this a day after the attack. Do British authorities agree that this looks like it was Islamic State, at least inspired?
I think that's still something that they're investigating. They've made a number of arrests in Birmingham and elsewhere where Khalid Massoud had links, Paul. The Islamic State itself, through its media channels, has claimed responsibility and said Khalid Massoud was a quote-unquote soldier of the caliphate. But that still remains to be seen, because the organization has a tendency to do that, where people who are inspired by its message, who are lone wolf characters, after the fact, when they go out, then the organization takes credit for them, and it really doesn't matter in a way, because they may never have had any direct contact with the organization. It may not have been plugged into official jihadist networks, but nevertheless drew inspiration from it, and then Islamic State can point to the fact afterwards and feed this to its supporters as a success.
All right. One thing we haven't heard so far is a lot of evidence from his computers or literature he was reading or anything like that, which typically in the United States with these kinds of attacks does come out pretty quickly. We haven't seen that in this one, but we have seen arrests in Birmingham and a couple of more on Friday. Is there that suggests that this could be a broader network?
It could be, and I think one thing to make note of the fact is that Khalid Massoud himself had a background as a petty criminal. He'd come into contact with law enforcers for other types of non-terror offenses. And the Prime Minister pointed out that he had been a peripheral, quote-unquote, character in other terrorist instances, but wasn't picked up, which recalls the Omar Mateen case in the U.S., where the authorities suspected something, but ultimately concluded he wasn't a threat. Unfortunately, it turned out to be the case. So, and this just goes to how difficult this new model of terrorism is, where it's these people with petty criminal backgrounds, radicalized somehow, and then with just a car and a knife, they can unleash havoc on a major metropolitan area.
Yeah, Birmingham is a particular source of concern for British security agencies. Explain why that is.
Well, it's 3 areas that are where most of the British jihadis come from. Right now, there's 3,000 jihadis that the British authorities are looking at. Not all jihadis, but extreme cases, extremists, radicals,
people
and so forth.
who are under suspicion.
Exactly. So you have Birmingham, and you have East London, and you have a suburb of London called Luton. These are areas where there are pockets of Muslim communities, vast majority of them perfectly law-abiding, but it's where these radical mosques, radical imams operate, and where most of the foreign fighters, for example, who go off to Syria and Iraq may originate from these types of neighborhoods. And you see these patterns all across Europe, specific neighborhoods around Brussels, specific suburbs of Paris, where you have typically ill-assimilated Muslim communities. Doesn't mean that all of them are ticking time bombs, but that they're these ecosystems that breed jihadism.
One of the things that's really interesting, this is the first big attack in Britain since, I think, the subway bombings in 2005. So the British intelligence services, security agencies have a pretty good record here, and yet they've been warning now for some weeks that there could be a lot more attacks. Is there any particular reason they've been saying that? Is this partly Syrian related, for example?
Paul, I think that this has been something that we should have been alert to, in the sense that as Islamic State is losing territory in Iraq and Syria, that it may attempt to radicalize more people. Now, again, it's not clear in this case whether Khalid Massoud was directly radicalized or plugged in. He may not have been. But the fact that these organizations feel squeezed in their terrorist homeland, so to speak, may result in more attacks abroad, just for them to be able to say that they're still in the game. I've heard from Middle Eastern security analysts and officials where they say, you know, watch out for the next wave might be ISIS 2.0 trying to prove itself, whatever that organization is, being extremely brutal, and then the remnants of ISIS 1.0 just trying to show that it's still in the game by staging brutal attacks.
Okay, Sora Mari, thanks very much for staying up late for us.
And we have a Fox News alert. A hospital spokeswoman says one person has died in a shooting along the Las Vegas Strip. We've been monitoring this barricade situation. Police say one suspect is holed up inside a bus on the Strip near the Cosmopolitan Hotel and Casino. Part of the Strip has been shut down, and the casino floor of the hotel has been evacuated. Other guests are being told to stay in their rooms. Officials say one person is dead, another is wounded. We're going to bring you more details as they become available.